Where did Fallout 3's bombs actually hit by any Austin?
I'm standing here in the post-apocalyptic streets of the hit 2008 video game Fallout 3, and I have a question. Does this look like a place ravaged by hundreds of nuclear explosions to you?
Not
now,
quite.
Obviously, the answer to that is yes. But
well, no, not quite. Because to be fair, if it was that many nuclear explosions, I'm pretty sure everything would literally be wiped out, and there wouldn't still be buildings. It looked like it was maybe like a couple, like maybe 2-3 max nuclear explosions for like buildings still to be left.
Playing Fallout 3 for the first time over these past couple of weeks, I started to get curious. Where exactly did all of these nuclear bombs drop? And
I'd assume like everywhere.
Exactly did they drop? Down to the square foot? Because I feel like I remember seeing
yeah, to be honest, if it was like, if it did hit like in a specific spot, it probably would be like more devastation compared to everything else. So that is a curious question.
Obvious nuclear craters
while
playing through the game, but not that many. Did I just miss them? Well, I'm gonna figure it out, and you're coming with me. If you want to. We're going to be scouring the capital wasteland.
I was about to say, like, what, you're forcing me? What the fuck? No, of course. It's consensual.
Nuclear Armageddon, including radioactive craters, knocked over electrical infrastructure,
Can you
and in
react
some
to Slop
cases,
Factory? Yeah, sure.
nuclear bombs.
I'll do it
Anything
after this.
that might be able to help us pinpoint where this nuclear fiesta actually occurred and how many bombs actually hit the ground. In other words, we want to know how Bethesda chose to fix
That isn't showing up? It's not? Oh, because I... Wait, what? Why did I remove it? None of the chat is showing up. The fuck? Why? Oh, but the chat is here, but none of it is showing up. That's odd. I'm not quite sure why that's happening. Dude, I got no clue. I guess we're going no chat this stream. That's a shame. Doesn't matter. There's nobody on Twitch anyways. We're fine.
In a place that doesn't really
if there is, I'll just read out their messages so you guys can
types of places
understand
that we're going to be looking at today really
what they're
come in
saying.
two categories. Some of them are spots that are very obviously sites of nuclear explosions. You know, places that were put there by the developer with the intention that the player would stumble upon them and go, oh, a nuclear bomb exploded here. Maybe it has references in the lore, or maybe it's just really obviously a radioactive crater. The second type of place we're going to look at are places with the telltale signs of a nuclear strike, but no explicit recognition by the game through conversations or audio logs or whatever. Places that we really have to pay attention to the environment rather than just being told by the game. And then technically there's also a third type, I guess, which is...
Was there even any places in Fallout 3? Because to be fair, it's been like years and years. Like Fallout 3 is the first Fallout game that I played. It was so long ago. I do not remember there being any, whatchamacallem, like explicit nuclear explosion sites.
Places with
or the character said, this is where the bombs exploded, right here.
Bombs in them that just didn't.
With the exception of Nuketown, obviously.
So obviously this is a pretty easy
or Megaton,
one. This is
not Nuketown. I've been playing too much fucking Call of Duty.
And you can tell that a giant bomb fell here on account of the giant bomb that's here. Now, this first one technically wasn't an explosion, so we'll use a little unexploded icon on the map here. You're welcome. Now, I know there's some debate.
I mean, it's not an explosion. Unless, you know, unless...
in the lore
unless
about whether this bomb actually like fell here or if it was brought here. I'm sorry, but these malnourished post-apocalyptic weirdos would not be able to drag a bomb there. And if they did... why would they set it up so that it looks like it crashed nose first into the ground?
No, it must have definitely crashed and just like been a dud and not exploded.
We'll talk more later about what the lore communicates about the game space versus what the environment communicates about the game space. But that is too boring for the first half of a YouTube video. We have nuclear bombs to find. And for those of you saying that a nuclear bomb never could have fallen from an airplane and impacted the ground without exploding,
no, that's very much
Yes,
possible.
it could have. It happened in North Carolina once. Twice, I guess, technically. There's a picture of it in the little crater that it created.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally just like how a grenade, you know, doesn't go off. It's just a dud. The spark didn't fucking light up the gunpowder and didn't explode. Just how the fucking chemical reaction, a nuclear bomb, didn't trigger. Because some elements didn't mix or whatever the fuck else.
Nuclear explosion is right
I don't know how fucking nuclear bomb works. Definitely, it's not like a fuse, right? Like a grenade.
Wow, it looks just like the photographs. With one small difference. There's a gigantic hole in the ground. Big hole in the ground plus radioactivity equals probably it was bombed by a nuclear explosion device.
Most
Out of
likely.
curiosity, I went to that nuclear bomb simulator website in order to try and figure out what size bomb actually fell on the White House. It looks like it was most likely a 300-ton bomb, which is currently the smallest bomb in the United States arsenal. Jesus Christ. If I had a 300-ton nuclear bomb and I had to pick a target for it, you know what I would pick? A very large, empty field with nothing in it in the middle of a desert. But if I was in the Fallout universe, I would probably pick a military base, which is why the next place we're going is Fort Bannister. The first thing that you notice when you come here is all of these tiny little craters dotting the landscape, almost like a bunch of little nuclear weapons exploded all around. But then there's also this
I'm assuming they were just
crater,
like,
and actually,
those were probably just like normal bombs and not actually nuclear bombs, I would assume.
with this big crater, you can see it if you look on the Pip-Boy map. That's how big it is.
That one's definitely
A
was a
little further
nuclear
west
bomb.
of Fort Bannister is a place called Vault 87. This is an underground vault outside of which a nuclear bomb exploded. You can't get within 100 feet of the place without dying of radiation poisoning.
Just
So
dies
that's
instantly.
good enough for me. Mark it down. Aside from all those, the only other place that is an obvious candidate for this is a gigantic crater in downtown DC. This gigantic crater is radioactive, and in the bottom of it there looks to be some sort of missile. Sounds promising.
Looks like a
But
rocket ship more than a
upon closer
missile.
inspection, it's not a missile. It's an airplane with an unexploded nuclear bomb on it. So it's an interesting sight for sure, but it's more in line with what we saw in Megaton than an actual nuclear crater. So use this
Interesting.
icon again. And that's really it for places in the game that seem to have been made with the intention of a player stumbling upon them and thinking that they are a nuclear bomb site. So what we need to do now is look for places that have indications that they were probably hit by one of these nuclear bombs.
Well, I'd say pretty much anything outside the actual map itself is most likely just been like flattened by nukes. Like that would be the actual like only valid explanation why that'd be just like desert and nothing else. For example, or I guess that's more desert is more like New Vegas thing. But still, you know, why there's nothing? It's just a wasteland. Like that would be because probably a lot of nuclear bombs would drop like a lot around the map. That would be the
even if it's
explanation,
not
I assume.
explicitly stated by the game. Now, obviously, I could just personally walk around this whole map for days at a time in order to find these spots, but I figured there's probably an easier way, which is to go on Google and find old Fallout fan forums and see if anyone has asked this question before.
Least
which
lazy
lo and behold,
YouTuber, by the
they
way.
have.
Least
So I
least
perused all of
lazy
these
YouTuber.
threads and collected any places that people brought up frequently that we didn't already cover. The first one of those places is a place called the Germantown Police Headquarters. This came up on a couple of different forums that I read. I don't remember there being any explicit evidence of a nuclear detonation here, but let's take a closer look and see what we can find out. That's the police headquarters there. You see behind it all of these wooden buildings. Now, the thing with nuclear bombs is that they are quite warm, so they do tend to burn things up. So the existence of these wood buildings does kind of indicate that if there was a nuclear explosion around here, it either wasn't directly on the ground or was a little bit further away. We do have the whole backside of the building totally torn off, and a large chunk of it literally pushed in.
Yeah, that
this
seems like
way.
it was done more
We do
by
have a
normal bombs
train
than
that
actual
was
nuclear
blown
bombs.
completely off its tracks, going that away. So if we were to draw two lines from both of those points in the opposite direction that the force was applied, you would end up with something kind of like this. So I do think there is a possibility that there was an airburst nuclear explosion right here quite a long time ago. And if I had to pinpoint the spot, I'd say it was probably right about there. Now, two other places that were referenced on a lot of these fan forums were, number one,
It's probably gonna have to be a little bit higher in the air then.
Apparently, if you look south, you will see a nuclear crater. And then number two, a couple different people referenced there being an explosion in Vernon Square. Now, upon further investigation, I think the Vernon Square one was actually just people misremembering where that crashed airplane was. So that one's out. But if you go to the top of Tenpenny Tower and you look south, look at that. Looks an awful lot like a nuclear crater to me. This
Indeed it
crater
does.
is off the
Where the
bottom
fuck is
of the
that?
map. Once again, you can see it on the Pip-Boy. But if you get close enough, you'll also notice that the trees surrounding it are knocked away in the direction that the blast would have come
That's
from. As
definitely
far as
meant to
I'm
be a nuclear
concerned,
bomb site.
good enough. Mark it down. Now, this is where things get a little bit trickier. Because as of now, we've marked off every place that is obvious. We've marked off all the places that aren't obvious that people have mentioned, which really only leaves all the places that aren't obvious that people haven't mentioned. And so far, we only have 5 actual possible locations of an
Yeah, I mean, if I was him, like, and I had this marked down, the most I'd do is probably just like explore this little thing to see if there's anything here, explore here, and then leave it off and be like, yeah, that's
which
it.
doesn't seem like very many. It's definitely a far cry from the hundreds that allegedly fell on this area. So now what? Well, I pretended a moment ago that I wasn't going to just wander around the DC wasteland
But
and
he
look
is,
for
isn't he?
craters myself, but that's exactly what I'm going to do. The question is, did I find anything? Yes, I did. Take a look. So one candidate that I located was just a little bit northwest of Rockbreaker's last
Interesting.
gas, and it is this big pit with this hole. There's actually kind of a faint,
That-
almost crater-like look.
I'd argue that's probably more like something that was meant to be like a mining area or something like that, because it looks like it literally has like a, you know, like a pathway around the thing going down. It doesn't seem like accidental. It seems deliberate.
Whole area. Could it just be kind of an eroded old mine? Definitely. One of the things I do like about this as an option is it reminds me of something
What I
that
said,
craters
basically.
do in real life on planet name of Earth, which is they form lakes sometimes. Crater Lake in Oregon is probably the most famous example of this, at least in the United States, but there's also this one in Estonia that kind of reminds me of things that you might see in Fallout, so that's pretty cool. None of the ones in real life were made by nuclear devices, of course. They were all created by asteroids or volcanic eruptions, but still... Aside from that, I was
guess that's
also
fair enough.
wandering around I think it was the Jury Street metro station, and I stumbled across this. This is a large, empty, open field.
Oh, and all the
Almost
trees are
no
knocked over,
trees,
so...
And the trees that are there are all knocked over in a suspicious direction. It's subtle, but the details are there. You can also see this little cut in the ground here with this rock up here. I almost wonder if something maybe exploded and forced this rock to wedge itself up there. Also up kind of near Fort Bannister and this metro station is this spot. It's things like this that really tickle my fancy, because on one hand, you can see this and think to yourself, wow, what detail. They really put the work in to have evidence of a nuclear explosion in the past. But on the other hand, would any of this even actually survive a nuclear bomb? Like, I'm not even sure if...
I mean, realistically, I think everything would just get flattened, like I said. I don't think anything would be left at all.
Survive 200 years not being affected by a nuclear device.
But by, at least by hundreds of nuclear bombs, obviously.
Much less
in this
having
small
been
ass area.
exploded by one. But I kind of think that's cool. They put details like this in the game to communicate to us that this is post-nuclear apocalypse.
Exactly. Like what matters is just that the fact that we are convinced. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter that if it's actually realistic or not. What matters is that you get the idea. You know, you get the idea. It's like, okay, I can see like that a nuclear bomb clearly caused some damage here, right? I'd be like, okay, yeah, clearly a bomb fell here. That's all the game needs to achieve, to be honest.
The detail itself isn't realistically post-nuclear apocalyptic. You know, it kind of reminds
the important
me of
part
how when
that we
people saw
believe.
the movie Apollo 13, they said this is ridiculous. This is just a bunch of Hollywood mumbo-jumbo trash, even though it was all very accurate. Or sort of like how Spotify had to program their shuffle not to actually randomly shuffle the songs, because when it did, people didn't think.
Most things, to be fair, do this thing. The random shuffling stuff, it's never random. It always like makes it so it never like chooses like the same song twice, for example. Or like the last 3 songs, they'll never come like one at a time. Or it'll like save the entire like, or like it will always save like a couple of positions, like, you know, before the current song. The couple of songs I played before that, it'll save it and make sure that they can't play in the same order again.
I think it was randomly
Or that even the same songs can play at all. And that just applies to different things as well.
shuffling the songs, so they had to program it to not actually randomly shuffle the songs. So
I remember when I was
think-
making my game, I had like 3 like things that would get shuffled at random, 3 like sound effects. And the issue is what happened a lot of the time is just the same 2 sound effects would end up playing, because I would like use like true randomness. But then I would have to like actually make it so like the last one gets logged, so all 3 like would like play once at least. You know, it would actually switch between all 3 once, and then like same 2 wouldn't. So the same 2 wouldn't just end up looping together.
it was randomly shuffled.
So that can actually feel like random at least.
To be made that maybe things like this is just, it's sort of dumbing us down in a way. Bethesda's just using like the bottom of the barrel, lowest common denominator way to
Or like in another game where I had I had like a thing where if you attack, you had like a critical chance, you know, to get a critical. I would have to like boost it. For example, if it got like below 50%, it wouldn't be critical. If it went above 50%, it would be critical. So I would have to like boost it. So like if like you don't hit a critical in 3 times, it has to go to the guaranteed critical, just so it feels like you actually can get it. Because otherwise it can happen that you just never get it. Even though that is, you know, RNG, it's random. But like it doesn't feel random, it feels rigged if you just keep not getting a critical.
this particular aesthetic, and maybe it would be cooler if they were more thoughtful about what life in a post-apocalypse might look like. Maybe we would get more interesting human stories, which is why Fallout New Vegas is good, but that the sort of constant argument.
Yes, but Fallout New Vegas aged much more poorly than Fallout 3, I would argue. The game looks like shit, it plays like shit. The stories aged like fine wine, but everything else, cheese or fucking milk. Spoiled milk.
Between 3 versus New Vegas, I think people do totally miss what things 3 has that New Vegas doesn't, because they're so preoccupied with what New Vegas has that 3 doesn't. That's just my opinion. And I didn't play Fallout 3 when I was young. This is not a nostalgia problem, so don't you try and throw that against me.
I did play Fallout 3 when I was young, but I still can see, like, I played New Vegas. I was like, yeah, the story already in the concept and everything else is so much better than Fallout 3. But I just don't, like, I just didn't have fun playing New Vegas, really. It's just like the gameplay isn't really there. The gunplay doesn't feel good. Just the mechanics of the game don't really feel too good. There's also, this might not be a valid complaint, but there's way too many options for like perks or whatever the fuck that you can have, and most of them just ended up feeling like completely useless. And it's like, why would I ever pick this? I would just end up going for like the same simple build every single time. Like just like maximum damage possible.
New Vegas heads,
and nothing
even
else.
Though you are completely right, obviously. Anyway,
then,
where were
because
we?
the other thing is as well, if you had like a speech check thingy, right? Most of the time that shit is random. So even if you don't have like very good stats, you could just end up like quick saving and then loading. And I would just do that over and over again until I got it right. So I was like, well, investing in these stats is completely useless. So I'm gonna fucking just grab the thing. This isn't like a complaint specifically to New Vegas, just like all of them, like all of the Fallout games.
Show me the map.
You just keep quick fucking reloading shit.
All right, perfect. There's also an unmarked spot on the map east of Meresti Station that has a gigantic radioactive crater. So it's kind of funny that that A, doesn't have its own map marker, but B, nobody online mentioned it because it seems very obviously a candidate for this. And I actually do kind of love that there's not a map marker for it. I think that's kind of neat. Games now have too many map markers. Too many. We need to restrict fast travel. It's a whole other video. So at this point, we have found...
I don't agree with the map marker bit. I think it's cool to have the map marker there, just so you know like which area you have explored. I just don't think you should be able to teleport to every single map marker, which is why I think like for example like using you know how a lot of people like use interactive maps for stuff. Like I used one when I played Red Dead 2. What I would do is basically I would just mark off all the spots where I actually found like some kind of thing, like even like because that thing doesn't just have like okay there's an item here. No, it's just like this is a location, some kind of location. I just go to that location, I see what's up there, I witness the location, I'm like okay, I saw everything this location has to offer. Even if I get nothing from it, it's still worthwhile because obviously you know Red Dead 2 is an amazing fucking game. It has a really good open world. There's actual shit to see that's really cool. It's like super immersive and stuff. So I would just like basically go to a location, maybe like grab some like supplies, which are kind of useless, honestly. But you know, I just grab some fucking pear tonics or something from like a shelf, and then I'd mark off the location, and then I'd know, okay, I was there. I'm gonna go explore here now and try and find other shit, you know, other locations and stuff. Or like I'd specifically use the interactive map to be like, okay, there's a location here. I'm gonna go there now. Like I think the map markers are very useful for that kind of thing, and it's really cool. It really just incentivizes exploring everything because you don't have to just wander around blindly or revisit or accidentally like revisit the same old location and be like, oh, I've already been here and I don't feel like motivated to explore anymore because I just keep going to the same locations I've already been to before, you know?
Found 8 nuclear strike sites and 2 unexploded nuclear bombs. The lore of Fallout 3 implies that DC was hit by hundreds of nuclear bombs.
Yeah.
So what gives? Well, first of all, I'm pretty sure we can actually find a few more potential.
Yeah, we could find a few more, especially like in these desert areas. Like there could be a fuck ton. Like he's here where there's no trees. There could have been one here. There could have been like one here directly on the bridge, maybe. I know, like obviously all around this whole thing, around the map here as well. Since there's no trees, I guess that could have been it. Or alternatively, this could be just set in a universe where there are also way weaker variants of nuclear bombs, which are nuclear, but like the weakest possible thing. Like they're as weak as like normal bombs, so they don't really cause that much damage.
Sites. We'll get to that in a minute. But secondly, there actually might be a pretty good explanation for this, and it has to do with scale. I feel like I recall reading a quote from Todd Howard or maybe somebody else at Bethesda where they were talking about how the Elder Scrolls isn't necessarily meant to be a literal facsimile of the world of Tamriel. That Skyrim is really more of an artist's rendition of the world with kind of like a wonky sense of scale, some flexibility with the specifics of the lore, and a very loose grasp of realistic unemployment numbers. I couldn't actually find the quote, so if somebody knows it, please post it down below so I can find it. And if it's not a real quote, if I just made it up, well, post it down below anyway so people don't know. But if we were to take the size scale of Fallout 3, meaning the way that it compares to the real size of that area in Washington, D.C. on Earth, and apply that scale to the number of nuclear strikes that we've found, where would that put us? The only problem is there's a lot of debate online as to the exact scale of Fallout 3. You know, we don't know exactly how big stuff is. We don't know exactly how fast player characters are walking. And it's also a real mishmash of locations rather than being an exact scale model of a part of DC. But the best discussion of the topic I could find was on a forum called No Mutants Allowed back in 2009, and they also could not agree at all. But using all the information that they provided,
And I saw 1.6 there several times, so.
As well as spending some time drawing squares on Google Maps, I feel pretty comfortable saying that the game is roughly a 1:8 scale of the area that it represents. So if we take that scale and apply it to the number of nuclear strike sites that we've found so far, you end up with, I'm going to tell you in a minute, because I have one more idea about how we might be able to find some more places that bombs have dropped. See, I've already looked in the lore. I've already read the wikis, the forums. I've already used my own mind. But the one set of people that I haven't talked to are the smartest people in the world. You guys.
Ah, yes.
I put the call out on my community page a few days ago asking if any of you knew
his audience,
potential places that we could investigate, and lo and behold, you came through. So here's everything that you guys
Bro
came
uses
up with.
light mode
Number one,
on YouTube, by the way.
Isabella Proud's camp behind the Tacoma Industrial Park. This is, first of all, just an awesome place if you've never been here. I wish I could tell you how to get here without giving it away, but it's just a really great location. And it's also very likely that this is the site of a nuclear strike. You have a giant crater, it's filled with water, there's radioactive ghouls. That's a shoo-in as far as I'm concerned. The next place I saw somebody bring up was the Arlington National Cemetery. And if you go there, you won't immediately see any signs of nuclear destruction, but head just a little bit north of it, and
yeah,
this is what you find.
maybe.
This one looks a lot like the ones that we found in Fort Bannister, so I feel very comfortable counting it. Somebody else brought up the Pennsylvania Avenue to Georgetown Metro Station. I don't know if I see it. Obviously, the train tunnels are all collapsed, which I think is what the person was thinking. The idea that, well, how would they have collapsed if not for a nuclear strike? But this metro line is really close to the White House, so I feel like it's probably a result of that same nuclear strike.
Yeah, or that just tremors caused by nuclear bomb that dropped like close by.
And looked east off the edge of the map, I would see some kind of nuclear crater. I looked all the way from east to west, and I was not able to see it.
Again, like all of these mountains could be just riddled with nuclear bombs as well.
And these two places might be my favorite of them all. First up, you have a place that's north of Springvale, but south of the Potomac River. When you come here, you won't actually notice it right away, but pay close attention, and what do you see? This little section of the river looks an awful lot like a sort of decayed nuclear crater, like something that was caused by a nuclear explosion.
Looks more like just like a normal river to me.
It has since eroded just a little bit, so the details are a little subtler. There's some good signs of destruction all around it as well. And then the other place is just south of Fort Bannister.
That one
now, obviously, this is pretty close to Fort Bannister, so whatever this is was probably caused by the same bombardment, but it's far enough away that I want to count it as a separate place. And I also just want to point out how relatively subtle the details of this one are. There's an electrical pylon a little ways away that got blown away in the direction of the blast. There's also a mound in the middle of the crater here, which does happen sometimes if like an asteroid smashes into the earth really hard. Sometimes it can hit it so hard that it actually bounces a little bit back up and pulls some of the land up with it, which can cause these little islands to form in some of these lakes that are made of craters like we talked about earlier. Now, I know that a lot of these details are probably an accident and that Bethesda probably didn't really think about each individual piece of rebar, kind of like how they probably didn't really think about the fact that in Skyrim these generating waterfalls.
That's the next video we're gonna watch, by the way, just so you know. Not after this, but like
realistic.
Later.
But I do think it's neat how this combination of intended lore and happy accident environmental design can cause you, the player, to almost generate these little mini stories about what may have gone on in these places. So those are all great candidates, and I really feel like it helps flesh out the map that we've put together so far. But one thing that kept bugging me was that even with all these marks down, it just seems weird that there's not that many craters everywhere. You know, this was a nuclear war. This was everybody shooting off every
Again,
single
it could have been just a bunch of nukes dropped like high up in the air, as in like they were like pre-detonator or something somehow, just to spread the radiation. Like that was the main goal of some of the bombs, not to cause like actual like damage, but just to spread radiation around. That's one of the possible theories, I would say. And then others, again, just hitting the tops of buildings, like high-rise buildings and stuff like that, which would only deal damage to just like buildings themselves and stuff. It wouldn't actually cause craters and stuff to form. Like not all the bombs have to hit the ground, you know what I mean? Some could have hit buildings and exploded.
It would just be a wasteland of craters. Like if you ever see that footage of old World War I battlefields, it's just like pounded with artillery. But also there is a little bit of a scientific explanation, or whatever you want to say. A lot of people brought this up when I posted about Fallout 3. They said most of the bombs were air bursts, which means they don't create craters necessarily. And air burst explosions also spread the damage out, which kind of explains how there's just like a general destruction across the whole landscape rather than like these specific points of destruction. There's great arguments going either way. You could just say artistic license. You can say it's an air burst, whatever you want to do. I'm interested in what the game environment is actually communicating to us, which is why, for good measure, I did one final lap around the whole map, and I didn't see anything else.
The fucking dedication.
Kind of. Probably. One more thing that might be worth considering is that all of these little nuclear puddles around could be signs of smaller nuclear bombs hitting the wastelands. But
that's what I thought as well. Like smaller bombs than even we have. Just like actual like mini nuclear bombs.
Most of these
that
places
are there just to cause like radiation to spread and not actually do much damage.
Where you find these nuclear puddles and whatnot don't have a ton of other environmental evidence going for them. So I don't believe that's the case. You can make that argument if you want, but I'm not doing it. That's not for me. That means that the actual, for real, face value total of nuclear explosions in Fallout 3 is 12.
Wow.
And also the 2 duds, obviously. Now, the neat thing is, if we take that amount and we apply that 1 to 8 scale that we know Fallout 3 is probably
over 100,
built at,
right?
we do get 96
nuclear
close strikes. Which, you know, it's a far cry from hundreds, but it's definitely enough. You know, it's definitely sufficient to level an entire metropolitan area. The only slightly amusing thing about that is that we know for a fact that Las Vegas was targeted by 77 nuclear bombs. So this would sort of imply that they saw the capital of the United States as only a marginally more important target than Sin City. But, you know, maybe they were worried about what Mr. House was up to. I can't blame him.
Yeah, but then again, to be fair, he says the capital of the city, right? But like, we only see one part of the city in Fallout 3. It's like we see the whole thing, right? There's still like a bit of an area like down past like the bottom corner. The bottom right corner. There's still area there. So most of the drops could have dropped directly on that city there. Like directly in the city itself. Like a bunch of them. Or state, whatever. So, you know, I'm not sure if it's ever said in Fallout 3 that specifically dropped in that area that in the playable area if hundreds dropped, or in the whole state if like hundreds dropped, or just the whole city, I guess.
He's a conniving freak.
In a whole like round area around the whole city. Because if so, I mean, then we only got to explore like 1/4, to be fair. Which means, yeah, it probably would be like around 300, 400 bombs in total, going by his calculations.
Me on Patreon, you're one of the greatest people I know. We'll see you in the next video.
Very, very good video. Actually, I might want to watch this later. Alright, that was a good video. That was a very, very good video.